Welcome back, welcome back. Hindsight, they say, is a beautiful thing, and there are plenty of pundits and politicians who will tell you that they saw the credit crunch coming, but nobody listened to them. Well, in most cases, they're exaggerating a bit, but one man who really can claim to have warned us all for years, and he's written about it in his new book, The Storm, is British politician Vince Cable. Vince, welcome. In order to keep this cheerful, this interview, last night there was a plethora of stories on the news and everything that basically the worst is past. This was the message from Britain and from the report on the 19 banks in America. Is the worst perhaps past?
I don't think so. I mean, there are some positive signals, and it's very confusing, but I mean, it is certainly true that the stock market is probably now coming back. The banks, at least for the time being, seem to have stabilized, and some of them are making money, but actually they're making money out of their clients and customers rather than through successful growth. But I think certainly in the Western world, and in the UK and the United States and Western Europe, we're going to see worse before we see better, and particularly unemployment, I'm afraid, is going to continue to rise to very worrying levels before it turns around.
That's the after effects of what's gone wrong. I mean, not necessarily new bolts of lightning.
No, and I hope we're past the worst of the financial crisis, but I don't think we should be complacent, because what's going to happen now is that there's a whole lot of bad losses from firms that have gone bankrupt, from further declines in the housing market, and the banks still have to absorb all of this. So we're not out of the woods in the financial sector by any means. I don't want to talk doom and gloom. I mean, there are positive things. I mean, a few months ago, people were saying, well, maybe we're back in the 1930s and the kind of collapse we saw then. And I don't think that's going to happen, because Western governments, the Americans, the British, the Europeans, the Japanese, also the Chinese, have had a massive injection of demand through money, through budget deficits, and it's like throwing the kitchen sink at the problem, but they've done it, and I think that will stave off the worst of the predictions.
And there's some, the latest news today about oil is that oil's gone up again, gone up 8% over the last 3 or 4 days. Is that significant, or is it up and down?
I think it is significant. I mean, we have seen an extraordinary crash from $140 to 45. The worry about the very low oil prices is that it isn't profitable for the oil companies, the state oil companies or the private oil companies to invest in marginal fields, and whereas you know, in order to accommodate a growing world economy there needs to be more capacity. That isn't happening because the prices have been too low. So one of the worries that we have to have, I think, is that as the world economy recovers, and particularly as China and India move forward and the Western economies get back into recovery mode, there isn't the oil capacity there to meet the demand, and there's a danger you then run into a new oil spike, and this then in turn creates inflation and higher interest rates and all those problems all over again.
And we look at what's going on and so on. We mentioned the thing about you having foreseen some of what, or a lot of what happened and so on. Is there anything that the world can create with more foresight, so that if ever this was to happen again, we would realize it was coming and do something about it in advance? Is that possible?
Well, I think the strongest recommendation is that we have to hang together, otherwise we hang separately. Yeah. The importance of the G20 meeting was that, unlike in the 1930s, when countries started fighting each other in a crisis, the countries of the leading countries of the world are agreeing to work together. So you've got the Saudis, the Chinese, the Japanese, the Europeans, the Americans round the same table. And that's the best guarantee we have that governments will react properly in a future emergency.
That's right. That's really probably the not huge headlines, but one of the best things about the G20 was that coming together. Thank you so much for being with us, Vince.
Thank you.
And thank you for bringing good news, and as well as the news you saw coming up in the future, and we'll look forward to you predicting our future again very soon.
Thank you.
And now to the man whose personal life is once again making the headlines, Silvio Berlusconi. Last week, his wife, Veronica Lario, announced in an open letter that she was divorcing the Italian Prime Minister because she was fed up with seeing him with minors. That's M-I-N-O-R-S. after he attended an 18-year-old model's birthday party, and she called his idea of having young, attractive female MEPs as shameless rubbish. But his popularity still seems to be on the rise, and Mr. Berlusconi doesn't seem to be worrying too much about his wife's allegations. So what kind of a man is Silvio Berlusconi? Joining me now is the Europe editor of The Economist, John Peet, and the Italian-American lawyer who helped Mr. Berlusconi on his 1994 campaign, Nancy Dell'Olio. Welcome to you both.
Nice to be here.
Nancy, that really is a question that people do ask, and you're well qualified to ask. What kind of a man is he really, Silvio Berlusconi?
Well, and I completely really know him very, very well, as I would say, because I know him. I had experience to 1994 to start. Actually, I was coordinated a campaign from Rome because I was very close. I was working like a lawyer when one of his best lawyer in Milan. Well, he had the good one in Milan, the little bit naughty one in Rome. And this, I'm saying this because I brought in my book. So it was my personal experience. So it was, and then it was a time for change. And we were all inspired by, but this man looks to be really, you know, it was a great need of change. There was been so much corruption. And then he came up with this idea in 6 months. And the idea comes from the fact that he owns a football club, Milan. And he decided, so the link was already there. So he just wanted to do to, so it was everything was ready around the country with all the support of Milan as a club. It was easy to find, and then it was connected football, called a party Forza Italia, like we screened this always at the stadium with the national team. So it was so quick, and he's great charismatic personality, he's a great communicator. I'm personally, I don't like him to be prime minister. First of all, the great conflict of interest. This was the first issue since the beginning. From my opinion, it was great, the energy that he put together. Then, if I were him, I would just step back and select the best women and men, the best team, and leave. That's what I would do in this case. But because he's in love with his egos, and the only toys left for him, the only things that he sometimes will come by is the power. And that's why we are where we are.
And you said charismatic and so on. Does he have great sex appeal for you?
Well, you know, I say men with power, always in a way, they have sex appeal. It goes together, I have to say. So, and then I think it's not only my opinion. I don't, personally for me, no, sex appeal, no. He's very great communicator, he's charismatic. For me, sex appeal personally has to come from different things. So it's not, he cares too much, a little details or aesthetic things. And then one thing that I never like it is the lack of sense of respect to a woman. And like the woman, ex-woman, he has a great chevalier. I mean, there's lines flirting. And but I will never consider a woman to be at the same level.
Yes, and you were talking about power there, and of course it was Henry Kissinger who said power is the greatest aphrodisiac of all, didn't he? John, what impression do you get of the man as you've covered him and investigated him and so on?
Well, he's a very successful businessman. He's clearly a good communicator. He has built his business empire, his media business empire, much more on contacts than on what you might call straight success in the marketplace, which is one of the reasons why a worry I have about Mr. Berlusconi is he doesn't really believe in the operation of free markets. He believes that you should create wealth by good contacts, good political contacts, and dealing with people. The other thing about him, of course, is that he does have a very large role in the Italian media, and indeed, as Nancy has just said, that clearly creates a major conflict of interest. You have a man who is Prime Minister, has some influence on state television, and also controls most of private television. And we have consistently criticised Mr. Berlusconi and indeed Italy for having a man as Prime Minister with these obvious conflicts of interest.
And he sued The Economist twice, didn't he?
He sued us more than once, yes. We've never lost, in fact. In fact, the most recent case, he lost, although he's appealing against that. But we are continuously in litigation with Silvio Berlusconi.
Will he continue with it? With
his always very terrible with him.
We have been great critics of him.
Very critics, definitely.
But I mean,
good
he
critics.
does all of these controversies, the conflict of interest, the scandals with the young girls, or alleged scandals with the young girls, and so on. He's still popular, getting more popular. I mean, Italians must love something about him.
Absolutely. Well, this was the thing I was considering. I was in Oman when I read the story from the. Then I was watching Al Jazeera and BBC World News, and I was a kid. And of course, I started to talk with my friends in Italy, journalists, trying to say, so what's going on? And still, I mean, it's incredible. And this was reported even from The Economist, how his trend, his popularity is even bigger. And even I was talking with my father, and I said, do you think he's reached now the limit? Oh no, it's just so manipulated by the left side. And I mean, this is why, because they were trying to do, the fact this is manipulation. She'd been manipulated, his wife, by left side, some press on the left, because allegedly she's connected with some intellectual on the left side. So he tried to make the focus of fact, because we're close to the election, European election, and local election. So, and there's like to be, they need a boost, the liberal left, a leader boost. So, but of course it's not. And I don't believe so. I don't think but definitely it is. Surprisingly, extraordinary how he's still even more popular.
Yes, he still is popular, and I mean, Italy has always been famous for short governments and so on. Yeah. But here, there's a chance that he's going to serve out his whole term, isn't it?
Yes.
I think he will serve out his whole term, and indeed, quite apart from our criticisms of him over the media conflict of interest, Italy is a country that has serious problems. It's a wonderful country, but it has terrible economic problems. And we have always said that what it needs is a government that's capable of bringing in reform, deregulating the country, doing a little bit what Margaret Thatcher did to this country. And it would be wonderful if Silvio Berlusconi were the man to do that. But the evidence of his previous two governments and of this government is that he's not a great reformer. And I think that's very regrettable, because he's now very popular, very much in control of the country. He has a large majority in both houses of parliament. He could make big changes in Italy, if only he would do so.
But he doesn't have the heart for that, really.
Well, first of all, I will say this like a joke that, of course, Margaret Thatcher is not a woman. We need a woman to accomplish reforms.
Well, it's fascinating, isn't it? And the popularity goes on and so on. You think you'll be writing about him for several more years?
He'll certainly stay this Parliament out, and he may then become Italian president, so he'll be in the news for quite a long time to come. Yes. And if only he were a reformer, Italy would be better.
Thank you both very much indeed. That was a very good tour d'horizon, and we thank you both very much indeed for being here.
Pleasure.
That's it for this week. My thanks to all of my guests. We'll be back in a week's time when we can predict confidently that Silvio Berlusconi will still be running it. Goodbye for now.